Bianca, thank you so much for being on board the Transatlantic. This is a good surprise.
Thank you.
And
Thank
thanks
you for
for
having me.
talking to me on Friday. I know that it's like, it's always like difficult to find the time, but I'm glad you're here.
When you have young kids, Friday is the same as Saturday, is the same as Monday, the same as every day. So all good.
So I wrote 7 questions, like the 7 C's, and like, I want to go through them and eventually capture like, the essence of you, if possible, through these questions. So let's start with the first one, okay?
Okay.
Now, we know that the ocean is like synchronicity melody, and like, the sounds of the wave, the movements, everything like truly like, flows perfectly. I read somewhere, actually, I don't remember if I read it or I was watching an interview, but I had this quote in my mind where one of the most painful moments in life, in where our heart and our mind, they're not in sync. It's actually physically painful. The heart will tell you something, the mind will tell you something else. So I want to kind of like dive into these moments. Have you ever had one of those moments? And if you did, as I believe everybody's so human, it did it, right? How did you actually tune them in? How did you like put them in sync?
Yeah. I think there's been a couple moments where maybe I can point out where I feel like my mind and my heart weren't at the same place. I mean, I'm from Brazil and I've been living in New York now for 13 years. So I would say that like my heart is always there. Like I've always liked living there,
Right.
and I came here as like, you know, I it was like, yeah, 13 years ago, and it was supposed to be like a quick opportunity to do something, then like go back to Brazil, and I ended up like staying and building kind of like a life here. But there's a little part of my heart that is always in Brazil. And I'm like, if it wasn't for work, I would be there. But the
Mm,
difference to me is that work is also my heart. Like I love what we do and I get excited about it. Like, so it's almost like I have the heart in two places because like,
right.
my heart is here at work and I'm so invested in what I do. So that for that reason, it's like there's that part of my heart here along with my mind, which is, the best place to be right now for me, New York, with Mischief now and just in general, like, lots of opportunities at different agencies. But there's always been a part of my
It's so
heart in
interesting
Brazil.
because I've been like in the United States for almost 13 years. So
Okay.
probably the same time that you enter the United States, I enter the United States. I was coming from London.
Mm-hmm.
And I do feel sometimes that my heart is like in 2 different places.
Yeah.
Um, Although I gotta say that after many years, I feel that this is home for me now. I'm mostly like California is home for me
Yeah.
because I've been in
Yeah.
California for a long time now. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, like,
I feel like if it was just my mind at work and it was more of like my head is that like it
right.
makes sense to be here and here's where the best opportunities are, or here's where I need to be, feels just like head, it wouldn't work because so it's like because my heart is also into work so much, it works that I'm here. But like I said, there's a part of my heart in Brazil. And yeah, I think that's kind of like
Yeah.
the
Well,
biggest thing that
definitely
comes to mind.
look like crossing an ocean, and that brings me to the second question. I do believe it's a transformative experience, right? It truly changed you. I think that's when you hear the stories of those people that they cross the ocean solo, it truly like transformative experience. One of the things that's I believe like is an extremely transformative experience is parenthood. I mean, like we were talking before, like recording these episodes, you are a mother, like and like I'm a father, and I do believe that when fatherhood happened to me, it transformed not just like the way I am, but it gave an age to my creative thinking. It changed it.
Mhm.
I don't know if like in better or in worse, but it definitely changed it. So my question for you is like when you just focus on your creative thinking, like the way you really come up with idea, how did motherhood change the process? Are you coming in from different places? Are you bringing like different feelings into like the brainstorming? What happened there?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I used to think that motherhood would be like something that would set me back a little. It would be like, it's never a good time because there's always like projects happening. I'm always, there's like a trajectory to my career and like things are happening that I'm gonna put a pause in it. But it always felt that way to me. But at the same time, it was something that I wanted to do. So I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna do this and whatever happens, happens. So it turns out it changed things for the better.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, I'm always more tired than I used to be, but besides that, I became I became a lot more just efficient. Like my
Okay.
time is used way better. So before, where I was like, I could procrastinate some, or I could, leave something for later. Now it's like I'm gonna focus on the work hours to get
Right.
stuff done because I need to get home to my kid and because I want to be there. I spend that time.
In specific about the creative thinking, right? You know,
Yes.
if you focus on the way you come up with the idea. I remember when I was
Yeah.
on my own, when I was single, like, you know, the way I used to come up with ideas was faster, quicker, but I felt that my idea were more unstable. Even like
Mm-hmm.
the way my brain waves were working was
Yeah.
very unstable. I think what parenthood gave me and brought
Mm-hmm.
into the creative thinking is stability. And I know that it sounds like almost like an oxymoron, like, you know, because you think like creative as crazy, but it adds a level to my ideas that I didn't have
Mm-hmm.
before. So
Yeah.
do you think that mother would give you like, you know, something more into the act of thinking?
Yeah. Yeah, because also like I was saying, because I had more time to procrastinate and I work better under pressure. Like I work better when I'm busier. I work better when like, time. So like my ideation process, it
Right.
wasn't as like, okay, let's do half an hour now. Okay, now let's go for a walk. Let's get a coffee. Okay, let's do another half. So
Right.
like doing that and focusing and kept pushed me to think past like the first level of ideas and like I think it also gave me perspective that I didn't have before. Because no matter what, you can relate to things, but until you are like you live that, you don't really
Absolutely.
you're
Absolutely.
not, you can't just relate. So I remember at the time I was running the Sandy Hook Promise account at BBDO, and obviously it's about school shootings, and I didn't have kids, and like I thought it was horrible. I could relate to everybody, and like I couldn't even imagine what those people had gone through. And I went on maternity leave and then I came back and it was time to do the campaign again the next year of the campaign. During that brief, I was like, oh my gosh, what happened? Because now this is like a whole new thing for me. And the way I was thinking about it and like the perspective of like, having a kid and thinking about my kid is gonna go through school and go through that. No way. Like it just changes. So and in general, like as a consumer and like if you're
That's
thinking on their mindset, you can relate to a lot other insights and things that
yeah.
only you experienced as a
I can
mom,
totally
as a
relate
parent.
to that. You know, it happened to me with the birth of my second child. I was working in San Francisco, and actually I was working on an account, you know, big gaming account. It was like launching like a first shooter game.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember like he hit me one morning. Like, you know, we would always come in, have like our daily stand up, and mostly the daily stand up was like reviewing, like, you know, footage from the game, discussing footage from the game. So you imagine you start the morning with like, you know, people shooting at each other.
Yeah.
Even though it's a video game, it's heavy, you know, and I think like it hit me one morning. I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't stand it anymore. It was just like, I think that what like, it's so interesting you say that because it hits you different. Even though like before and after, there is a before and after, and like the perspective change and affects also like the way you create. Very
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, third question. The ocean is a playground for dolphins. Play for dolphins is an important part of their life. It's more than a part of their life. It's actually essential. It's through play and through gaming that they develop like certain kind of skills that they are like essential to their existence. Now, they say that the playground of our life extend from age 14 to age 24. Maybe like for like, you know, for other people may differ for a few years, but pretty much those are the years where we start playing, we start forming as a persona. Do you remember those years? If I were to ask you to like, you know, like drive back into that, into like, you know, that playground, what did you think like shape you? Like, what did you do anything? It was a game or some sort of thing that you used to do that truly like shape you, the persona that you are today?
Yeah.
The
I'm a
act of
very
playing.
yeah. I'm a very nostalgic person, so I'm always thinking back. And my husband is often joking about like, just like, no, live now. Think about this moment. Don't miss the past. Like, and I'm like, I know, we need to be present. But I often think about like, you know, specifically the time where you are about to, you know, you're like in high school and you're about to go to college and you're thinking about your life choices and trying to like, you know, understand all of that. um i I really, you know, those moments a lot. But I don't know if there was a specific thing where I
Mm.
was like, oh, this shaped me. I think I've always been very you know, I've always been very insecure and
Mm.
like, sorry, it's more like a dependent person. From like, I've always wanted people next to me. I would never be
Oh,
the one
okay.
that would want to like leave abroad. I would be like, no, be like alone, you know, away from my parents and be. So I've always been very close to my comfort zone around that time,
Mm.
but that maybe allowed me to like push you know, my imagination or myself, like to be in my safe space to kind of like do
Okay.
things that were a little more out there
Talking,
for my standards.
so talking about moments, right?
Yeah.
I want to ask you this question. Like, if you think about this moment, I mean, not necessarily this one
Hmm.
right now, but let's say this large moment, it's Friday, you're living in New York City. Now, think about this moment. Now, what I'm going to ask you, like, think about a moment in your past where this moment felt so far away and so crazy. Do you remember? Okay, let me tell you, sometimes I try to, like, you know, put my experience on the table. There was a time, I think it was, I was in Rome, and I think it was 1994.
Hmm.
It was actually after I graduated college. I graduated college in 1993, and I went to London. I came back from London. I was living in Rome. And if I think about where I am today and where I was back then, oh man, it felt, this is crazy. This could never happen in a million years. That, like, you know, many years after, my life would have unfolded in California. I have like kids and wife and everything else, and like build a life on the other side of the ocean. uh that moment felt so farther. Was there
Yeah.
anything like this in your life?
Yeah. I mean, just the idea of having moved somewhere and like being away from my family because of my personality and because of how I am. I think any moment that I think about, like, you know, uh, when I was in college, when, you know, I'm like, this would never be me right now. Like, if I were to imagine, like, no, Bianca would never be living alone. She would never be, you know, doing it. Like, it would not be the case.
Mm.
But I think that when I went to be an exchange student in New Mexico, so I went to
Okay.
a small town in New Mexico when I was 15. I went as like for 6 months.
Wow.
My parents like convinced me that like I really needed to have this experience. My we are in four. My siblings had done it, and I took that plunge. And I think that was also the moment where I started trusting that, you know, I could maybe experience different things and push myself out of my comfort zones, and good things would come out of it. But so that was kind of like a, you know,
Yeah, I think
the
there is always
vision of.
like, in the life of immigrants like ours, there is always a moment where you taste the water and you say, yeah, maybe I can do this. For me, it was
Yeah.
actually 1990. Sorry, I graduated college in 1997. I'm confusing the dates, but and then I
Yeah.
left and I went to London for like 8 months doing nothing, literally
Hmm.
nothing, just like
Yeah.
going to the library and like, you know, reading books, reading, like, you know, writing. But it was a moment where I thought, I think I can do this. I think I can
Yeah.
literally break, like, you know, the mold, and like can leave the family. I was the only one that literally left because of my family's in Italy. I guess like your situation is the same, right? You're probably the only one that left Brazil. Yeah, see, that's
Yeah.
like, Very interesting. Okay,
Yeah,
look.
well, although I have a younger sister who did the same exchange student program, but instead of just doing for 6 months, she was like, "This is it. I'm not moving back." So, but she's not in New York, so yeah.
Awesome. Okay, look, the longest chain of mountain, you may think that is like visible to the human eye. It's actually not. The longest chain of mountain is actually under the ocean. And they say that this chain of mountain is less explored than either Venus or Mars. That's like give you like really put life in perspective. Now, this fact make me so ignorant, right? That is almost ludicrous. Like, you know, we work in advertising business where every single day there is either someone that wants to mentor you, someone that wants to like teach you something. And I'm guilty too. Like, you know, sometimes I have this attitude of like, I know this, I can tell you how it works. But there is never a moment where someone actually stand up and say, I don't know shit about this. I really don't know. Like, you know, so let's figure it out together. Is there anything that you really don't know and you say, you know, I really should just like make time to get to know this thing because it's going to be valuable for my career?
Yeah. I mean, I've always tried to work with people that were better than me, that I felt were better than me, because that always pushed me to be better.
Right.
And for a long time, I felt like I needed to just pretend that I was as good as them, or had all the questions, or needed to prove to them that I'm like, you know, great. And so they want to keep me on their side too. And they feel like it's equally valuable for them to have me, you know, there. And then there's been this sort of like shift where you realize how you just sometimes want to like get people that are better than you, or that know more than you of certain things, to do that thing, and then you can just kind of like champion them, and like you can just say, I don't know, and we're gonna figure it out. And that makes you so much more vulnerable, but in a way that it just makes it everything else feel more real, and people to trust you in like the other things that you're saying. um so there, I definitely feel that. I think I've tried to go after things that I'm like, oh, I'm not really good at that. Let me try to like take a course, or like I've always been very focused on my career. So before I had a kid, it was just all about my work. So it was anything that was like free time. It was like something that I would be researching about work, or like some course that I would be taking, or something that I would be like whatever I didn't know enough of, I was like, okay, I need to try to be better at that. But then I learned also to be comfortable with not having all the answers, and that's helped me a lot,
You
especially
seem
now.
to be a person, like the way you talk, the way you lead, even like the tempo, your tempo, very like, you know, very with the head on your shoulders. Even you just say, even before, like, you know, you start your career, like even before having like, you know, your first kid, you always was so focused on your career, making like, you know, smart choice. Was there a time in your life where you were just a fuck up that you say is like, you know, was like, I'm not getting my shit together? I think if I look at my career, I spent a good chunk of years. I was very, very lucky to find myself in very good agency. But to be honest with myself, the work wasn't the focus for me. I was just a fucked up. Like, you know, I had other things going on in my life. Were you always like just a straight arrow, or you never like?
A little, it's boring, and like you know, but yeah, I've always been, it's not that I always knew what I wanted to do and always like knew the steps, but I was I because I somehow, like when I started university and learning what advertising was all about, I was like, man, I love this. And then I would like, every time I learned that, I would observe like things, and like I would be very paying attention to like how things work, or like how people do it. And so I would keep me in check, and just be like, okay, I've been doing this for 6 months. Is this the right thing to do? Is this something else? Like, so I've always been like that, even though I didn't know, you know, before what I wanted to do or anything. But I've never been the crazy,
It's like,
like,
because
yeah.
in my case, I always knew what I wanted to do, which is to write, right? Like, and it didn't change a iota. It was exactly the same. If I look at my back when I was a 5-year-old kid that wanted to write, and right now they pay me to write. It's nothing has changed, but I truly went to some dark years. I guess, like, this is like very interesting, because I think whenever I found people, like, I've talked to people that had the different experience, they give me like a totally different perspective in the business. And talking about like life as a creative act, they say that life is a creative act. You have been having, I don't want to say you had, you have been having a wonderful career. Which point of your career are you? Which, if it's like your career is a creative act, are you in the act 1, 2, 3, 4? Are you in between? Are you in the middle? Are you towards the end?
I mean, hopefully I'm in the middle, and there's still a lot, because I'm young, and like I think that it's, I still have ambitions, and I think that a lot of the things that were important to me in the past, like I see them evolve, and then I, like, my ambitions kind of change, and so, like, I feel that that will still happen, and yeah,
Does it feel
hopefully I'm not at the
sometimes
end.
that when there is a new year begins, does it feel sometimes that you are on act 1? I mean, the old saying that says like every day is a day 1, but I mean, the industry changed so fast, so radically, that I could not even, like, I don't consider like the job I used to do in this industry in 1998 the same that I'm doing right now. So somehow the creative act keep changes. As if it was like a playwright, it would a never-ending playwright, kind of like a Samuel Beckett type of playwright. It's like
well, in that sense, I would say that I've never gotten comfortable, and it was always like, okay, I've done something great. Okay, like, this is the start of like now something else. So, like, every time the bar was high, it just felt like, yes, now we have to start over and beat that or keep that. Having started Mischief, and like having been recognized as like Agents of the Year or so stuff.
great.
Now
That's
it's
act
like, it feels
1,
like
right?
Act 1. Now it's back to like, but how do we beat that this year, or how do we continue to do that? So in that sense, it feels like you're not just comfortable writing on anything, and you're always like, okay, start over, or like do it, do it again, or do it better, or what was wrong. So yeah.
Last question: if there was a wind that blew your sail, like you had to give it a name, what would the name be?
Resilience.
Resilience. A lovely word. Lovely word. You think like resilience has been like the common denominator in your career?
Yeah, because I don't think I was, I don't think I was the one of those like brilliant creative people that like right away get a brief and they're like, oh my God, what about this? And like it blows people's mind. For me, it was always like, I had to learn how to do it, really, because I think when I got to the US, I didn't have the head that like portfolio is cool, let me learn everything. So like for me, it was like a learning process. But then even after that, there's a bunch of creatives that have amazing ideas, but then their ideas get killed like for some reason, and then they get so frustrated they can't get past that, or they get like so like tired that they're like, okay, what's my plan B, because I can't deal with the process, with like the layers, with the whatever it is. So I do think that resilience is almost more important than being the most brilliant people.
Bianca, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. And I mean, it's like it was very interesting, like, voyage across the ocean. I gotta say, our experience are very, very similar. So I'm glad I talked to you, and like to probably like, cross the ocean. Thank you so much.
Thank you. No, maybe tonight I'm gonna like go get crazy drunk, go start the fucked up phase of my life.